Well, after a long wait, Dune Part 1 is finally here. It wasn't advertised as Part 1, but it's Part 1. I've been excited to see this for quite a while, and watching this movie was pretty cathartic for me because summer movie season wasn't all that great in my opinion. There were a bunch of films that disappointed or were things I never expected to be good in the first place, so it feels like it's been a minute since I've seen a movie that really knows what it's doing. Before I go any further, I guess I should state for the record that I'm not technically in the Dune fandom. That might surprise you since I've been talking about it for a while now. I've seen bits and pieces of the David Lynch movie, I enjoyed the Sci-Fi Channel miniseries, and I tried reading the book once years ago, but there's so much in there my ADD just wouldn't allow for it. So I know the basic story beats and characters, but I'm not a Dune expert or anything. So I wasn't looking forward to this as a Dune fan. I just wanted to see it, one, because it's Denis Villeneuve's next film and that guy's a genius, and two, just as a fan of good movies. And turns out this is a pretty great one. There's two different aspects we need to talk about: the visuals and the story. Visually, the movie is absolutely stunning. You can tell from the first frame that Villeneuve had a vision for this and the right people in place to pull it off. Cinematography, gorgeous. Direction, immaculate. And the sheer scope of this thing is gigantic. Even though it mainly takes place on two planets and one is just a big desert, it somehow still feels enormous just because of the way shots are composed to give you a sense of the massive scale of everything, like spaceships and the sandworms and stuff, and the result is an absolutely epic looking movie. Arrakis is beautiful at times, terrifying at others, and keep in mind, I'm just talking about a desert planet here. You wouldn't think a desert would be that interesting, but the world is so rich and fully realized, and there are so many different things to look at and explore, from the art design, costume design, CG. The whole movie is a technical masterclass. I expect them to sweep award season in those categories. Hell, just in terms of the sheer scale of the whole thing, I'd say Dune easily looks and feels like a more expansive universe and story than anything the Disney Star Wars movies have offered up, and that might not be saying much because Disney Star Wars is what it is, but I'm not sure what else to compare it to. So aesthetically, the film is just jaw-dropping, and I'd recommend it on that basis alone, but then you've also got the story, which has a scope to it the likes of which I haven't seen in a long time. Now, I admittedly am not the most knowledgeable person ever about this franchise, but I know enough to understand that the book was gonna be a nightmare for anyone to adapt, because that is a dense read. On top of the basic adventure stuff, there's politics, subterfuge, world building, ancient family rivalries, superpowers, warrior nuns, the rise and fall of empires, and loads of other stuff. And it does make the universe Frank Herbert created seem fascinating, but there's also a ton of information, and there isn't a whole lot of it that you can cut out because so much of it is important. And even with the huge amount they're able to cover in this movie, the universe is so detailed and vast, it feels like they've barely scratched the surface of it, hence why the movie is well over 2 hours while only covering the first part of the first book. But I'll give them a lot of credit because the movie may be long, but it never feels long. Watching this, I never once felt restless or bored because Villeneuve has such a great sense of pacing. You're getting new information about the story and the characters all the time. It's all really interesting, and there's very little, if any, dragging of the feet here. The filmmakers seemed very aware of the mountain of details they needed to convey to the audience, the huge amount of story they needed to condense, and I think they did about as well with that as anybody could. This is one of those movies that you can watch again and again, and every time you're going to be noticing new stuff you didn't pick up on before because there's just so much in there. In fact, in the entire movie, I think there was maybe one scene they could have cut. Everything else felt essential because it was telling us things we needed to know about the characters or setting up future events and things like that. There's almost no wasted time here at all. There's a lot more of the story in there than I ever thought they'd be able to cram in, and for the most part, they did a really impressive job juggling everything. I don't know if they could have done much better. Even then, though, you're never going to be able to cover everything. And so there are a couple elements that are not sacrificed, but they feel truncated. There's one or two notable characters who will need to appear at some point but are conspicuous by their absence. I have no idea where you could have fit them in, and it shouldn't be a problem as long as they appear in part 2, which I'm sure they will, but they're not there right now, and that's a bit of a shame. It wasn't absolutely necessary that they be in part 1. I think there was something to be gained by including them, but with a story this dense, you've got to make cuts somewhere, I guess. There's a subplot where someone gets betrayed that I thought could have used a little more attention because it shows up very quickly and is then dealt with very quickly. All the stuff about the Bene Gesserit and the Kwisatz Haderach, it's in there, but I got the sense that the filmmakers were like, okay, we really want to spend more time on this and explain it more thoroughly, but we just don't have that time right now. There's so much else we need to cover. So we're gonna tell you just the stuff you absolutely need to understand it, and then we've gotta move on. So I'm not gonna say the movie is a mental workout, but it is a movie that requires you to pay attention, because there's enough information for you to get a clear picture of everything, but that information is coming at you all the time, and there's a lot of it. And not just in the dialogue. Sometimes it's just implied in characters' actions or subtle mannerisms and things like that. So if you're tweeting during the movie or taking a bathroom break for 2 or 3 minutes, odds are you're going to miss something important. And even if you are paying close attention, it needs you to really think about what you're watching. So it doesn't hold your hand or spell everything out for you or dumb things down. This is a movie that will not let you turn your brain off if you want the full experience. Now, for some people, that may not scratch them where they itch, but I appreciate it because I like when movies don't treat the audience like idiots. I have to watch enough stuff that does already, and it's slowly sapping my will to live. And adding to that is the fact that this is only part 1, so a lot of it is setup and character stuff, and the payoffs for much of that are going to be in part 2. For example, Zendaya, fairly visible in the trailers, but she's not in the movie as much as you might think. We see her in short glimpses and dream sequences, but we don't meet her in the flesh until like the last 20 minutes. There's all this talk about the Fremen and desert power and stuff, and it sounds really cool, but again, that doesn't start to come into play until around the last 20 minutes. So if you're expecting payoffs for everything the movie builds up to, well, that doesn't happen. Some of those payoffs are in there, enough that it's a satisfying watch, but others you're gonna have to wait for because we're just not there yet. The story is too big, which does have an effect on the way the film wraps up, because the movie doesn't really have an ending. It just kinda stops. Now, I don't know if there was a better place to put the to be continued, so they probably made the right call, but it's pretty clear the story wasn't really meant to be broken up like this. So it's a little bit awkward when the credits start rolling, and suddenly you're like, really? It ends there? Gotcha. Don't be under the impression that the movie just leaves you hanging, though. It doesn't. There are a number of characters and plots that are open and shut by the time it's done. So even though it does end in the middle of the story when it's just ramping up, there's still a sense of closure there. So it feels like an appropriate place to leave things for now. The acting is top-notch, every part is very well cast, and most of the actors just disappear into the roles. But if I could single out one person in the cast, Stellan Skarsgård as Baron Harkonnen. Wow, this guy is creepy as hell, playing this depraved, sadistic madman. This is one of those villain characters who's so vile, so loathsome, it just makes your skin crawl whenever he's on screen. It's fantastic. He's not there very long, but when he is, I was getting Emperor Palpatine vibes from this guy. In a good way, not in a Rise of Skywalker way. The action, also terrific stuff. As I understand it, the biggest action set pieces are in part 2, and this one is more story and character based, but the action we get is pretty thrilling, and they don't bludgeon you to death with it. They definitely pick their moments, but that's why it works so well, because there's build up to it, and when they do get to the action, it means something, and you know shit's about to get real. And I know I might sound vague about a lot of this stuff, but I'm really trying not to spoil anything. Fans of the franchise are gonna know what happens anyway, but even so, even with my admittedly limited knowledge of Dune going in, this is the most most well-realized film adaptation of anything that I've seen in a long time, and I don't want to ruin the experience for anybody. This was definitely a passion project for the filmmakers. There's a whole lot of blood, sweat, and tears in this thing, and it really shows. Dune Part 1 did not disappoint. This is intelligent, thought-provoking, hard science fiction that encourages the audience to keep their brains turned on for a change, made by a master craftsman, and it was pretty much everything I was hoping it would be. And considering how complex and how difficult that story is to adapt, it's really hard to imagine how this could have turned out much better. I absolutely recommend that everybody go to the theater and see this. Don't blow it off on streaming. This is a cinematic movie. You need to see it on the biggest screen you can find. Dune is a great film that deserves your money, so go out and support it, because if we don't get part 2, I will complain on the internet. Thanks for watching. If you loved or hated this review or this movie, let me know in the comments. Ding the bell icon and follow my social media to always be notified when I upload new stuff. I also have a live streaming channel, which YouTube is being a jerk about right now, but they've got to stop sooner or later. All the links are down below. And most importantly, don't forget to thumbs up the video, share, subscribe, and make sure you're still subscribed, because what really deserves to be sent to a death-trap planet where his insanely malicious and jealous political rivals try to have him killed is the YouTube algorithm. That's all for now, but I'll be back with more soon. So stay tuned for that, do all the YouTube things, and I'll see you next time. Go see this movie. I mean it. Go. Right now.